Billy and Ian from The Cult, welcome to The Noise.
Hello.
Thank you.
The Cult, you've almost sort of outgrown yet another name. You're hardly cult status anymore, are you?
No, we're now all status.
Yeah, we're now status quo.
Actually, earlier in this tour, in your American leg, you must have played to some pretty big stadiums. You played with Billy Idol's band, I believe.
Yep, we did. We're trying to forget it. No, we did. Yeah, for months, like 3.5 months, we were on the road with him.
Yeah.
And his band. We did. Yeah, we did sort of quite big places, I suppose. Not particularly big by American standards. I mean, it was anything between.
So like the mid-sized venues, like sports arenas, 15, 20,000 people.
Do you change your performance at all when you play those size of arenas as opposed to, you know, the 2,000-seaters in pubs that you're playing in some parts of Australia?
A pub? Are we playing a pub? I'm going home. Nobody told me we're playing a pub.
No,
I've never played a pub in my life. Do we? We wear bigger shoes, I suppose.
Because that's kind of impression, you know,
Yeah.
you look bigger than what you really are.
Yeah. No, those kind of gigs, not really. You just do it. You just do everything bigger, I suppose. You know. You just
Do everything bigger.
Leap a bit higher.
No, what you have to, when you're backing someone up on a tour like that, you have to shorten your set down, so that's paying. We usually do like an hour and 3/4, 2 hours, and with Billy Idol were doing 45 minutes every night, and that was it. So you just get going, and it was time to finish, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a drag.
Yeah. I hear that the two bands got along very well, though, and that there are a few practical jokes being played.
Yes.
What was the most memorable one?
Had to be the end of the tour. We dressed up our bass player as Steve Stevens. Spent 4 hours meticulously recreating a Steve Stevens outfit out of gaffer tape, which for you is gaffer tape's the sticky tape that technical people around rock bands use. It's world famous. The world is stuck together with gaffer tape. I made this sort of white Steve Stevens outfit out of towels and gaffer tape. We actually he had a pair of running shoes on, and we taped 7-Up cans to give him that kind of Steve Stevens heel, which he's well known for. And we did his hair and everything, and we threw him on stage dressed up like with like a rubber guitar. I mean, you had to be there to appreciate it, you know.
It's all on video 8 though. It'll be coming out in the Cult movie.
I look forward to that. One of the things you did in the States was you played at the New Music Seminar, and in fact, Billy, you were on the panel, the last panel, the artists panel.
Oh yeah, that was very interesting.
Along with a few other famous people or infamous people.
Yeah, it was kind of good,
Yeah.
in a way. It was a weird thing to do. I've never done anything like that before.
Basically, you were answering questions from the audience, weren't you?
Yeah, it was kind of weird because, you know, because they had like Al Green there, it was sort of like a little bit like everybody wanted to really pay homage to the greatness of the man, which is like, I didn't really think that was the point of a new music seminar and a discussion that was supposedly there to help young artists. It was kind of, that was a bit of a drag, but that's a very American
Yeah.
thing.
Well, you were sitting next to Dion.
Yeah, I was
Didn't
saying
tell me that.
Dion, yeah. Well, I
We
don't
like Dion,
particularly.
he's very good. We've got all his records.
I didn't really know too much about Dion, to tell you the
Probably
truth.
before your time,
I think
actually.
it was before my mother's time. Yeah, it was good. I think the thing was okay. It's not particularly new music anymore. It's a bit like a regular industry convention.
Is the Cult new music?
We've been going for 4 years, you know. Kind of think we transcend all that kind of independent new wave, new music vibe. You know, we just we did it as a favour to the new music seminar people because we'd been involved with them in the past, and you know, it seemed like the final thing with the kind of blow the new music myth apart. You know, one of the reasons for doing it. And I think when people came to see the show, they realised that we weren't really part of that whole thing. You know.
A bit more new music than Al Green, I think.
Yeah, right.
And Dion.
Yeah, you know.
You know what I mean?
It gets confusing though, doesn't it? I mean,
It really does.
I mean, Al Green makes new music from new records.
I thought it was interesting, Billy, that when you were asked who influenced you to get into music, I think that was the question, you said it was the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, I didn't say that to be awkward. It was I just answered the question directly. That was the band that I saw that made me actually think that you could possibly be in a band and do it, as opposed to, you know, just play guitar for a hobby or play like in your local clubs and stuff in the city that you're from. the whole punk thing opened it up. So that's why I picked that. It wasn't to just be awkward because they all expected me to say Led Zeppelin, which is what they did.
The thing is, the cult's been through quite a few transformations since the early days. The name has changed 2 times, but also the music and the image has changed.
Yeah, well, like we've been going for 4 years, you know. It's more of an evolution. I'm just constantly influenced by things, new ideas. I mean, we've never got kind of in a rut at all. I mean, as regards to name changes, Southern Death Cult was a completely different entity to this, you know. All we decided to, that was a band that I was a singer for, and I left them. All we decided to do when we started was to capitalise on the success of Southern Death Cult and take the name Death Cult, and all the fans that we built up with Southern Death Cult identified with that name. So we had an instant following, you know. And here's me and him sitting in the bedroom with like 2 songs. And like
2 songs and an instant following.
It was like a blag, you know. It was like a real blag, but sorted out. We got a record deal and everything together out of it.
You had a record deal on 2 songs.
Yeah, we had a record deal on like no songs.
No songs. We were a bit smart in a way, I think, in retrospect, because a lot of that scene that was happening in England at the time kind of ground to nothing, and we figured that, well, once we'd got the band together, we'd best get it off the ground rather quickly before the whole thing sort of ran out of steam, which it did. I mean, if you look back to the amount of bands that were up and coming and getting deals at that point, there's very few left that are actually out now, like The Mission and Andy Eldritch, which is Sisters of Mercy. Other than that, I don't seem to see anybody else around. There's nobody left.
Well, the cult's gone through a number of transformations, name changed twice, and your image has changed over the last few years. I mean, even the look of the band
yeah,
is
there's
completely
2 years
different.
in between those records, you know. 2 years is a long time. First time I was coming to Australia, you know, people don't really realise the band's been going that long. It wasn't like an overnight thing, you know. It was always, if you look at the Love album, for example, there's 2 tracks in there that stand out, like Love and the Phoenix. I think we kind of it showed which direction the band was going to go in. They were like, you know, blatantly rock tracks, you know.
So the band was sort of still feeling its direction at that stage?
We were just like focusing our energies and learning about ourselves, you know. Developing, the character was coming out, and playing styles, singing styles, songwriting was getting much better, you know. It wasn't like shrouded in mystery and multi-layered guitar kind of thing.
We just had our first hit as well. I don't know whether people know. I mean, what actually happened was Sanctuary came out as a single in England in sort of spring of '85, and that was a hit, and that was the first record we'd had that had actually got in the big chart, as opposed to like the independent charts. So going in to do the Love album, it was basically everybody around the band just was saying, well, whatever you're doing, just do more of it, because you're doing something right. And it was, I mean, literally we started recording the record and we had to go and do Top of the Pops, and it was all very thrilling and exciting, so there wasn't any like worrying about things. There was nothing to worry about. It was all a very positive thing. So with the record, we just did what we liked. Anything that we wanted to put on it, there was no, I don't know, constraints. There was no worries about, no worries. There was no, like with the Electric album, once you've had success with a certain kind of music, people always start going, oh, they've changed, oh, they don't sound like what they used to, they're terrible. With the Love album, we didn't have to sound like anything. We could do whatever we wanted, and that was the result. And also, it was only the second album we'd ever made. I mean, neither of us had ever been involved in making an album other than the Dreamtime album, which was the first proper album the Cult did.
Or any other kind of like proper recording, really. Because the producers we worked with in the past were just like sort of Joe Bloggs, you know, sort of part-time producers. We had one guy that we worked with for the Dreamtime album, a guy called Joe Julian, who we did Spirit Walker, and he recorded it and mixed it within like sort of 10 hours. In fact, he mixed it within an hour and he said, I'm off home for me dinner. Yeah. That was the kind of vibe, you know. It was kind of weird. And then Steve Brown was the first proper professional producer we ever got involved with. So we were a bit wogged out, because he was a very sort of state-of-the-art producer. He was really into using all the effects and multi-layering things and creating, like, he just had this vision of like kind of a really deep, heavy sound, you know, multi-textured sound. And we kind of went, oh, this sounds good, you know, because it sounded professional for a change. So in between the period between Love and the Electric album, we basically realised what the strengths were of the band, we just decided we wanted to strip down the whole thing, just get to the meat of the matter. You know, I think the next album will probably be a cross between Love and the Electric album. We'll have the best of both worlds, you know.
Right. Well, the producer of the Electric album was Rick Rubin, who's best known for his work with the Def Jam artists. Why did you choose him?
Well, when you consider Rick Rubin, you know, as being associated with the rap artist, what really put Beastie Boys and Run DMC onto the world scene was the fact that he mixed it with rock music. And that's Rick's main bag, was rock music, and that's why we got involved with him, because he's really got a good ear for guitars. He really likes his guitars a lot. And also he's got, you know, likes similar bands to us, has long hair and a beard, and he's just like a blue cheer AC/DC freak. So it's kind of exciting to work with him. There's not one mention of James Brown or anybody like that during that session, you know.
Yeah,
it's kind
it was
of
cool.
interesting.
And he also wasn't like your. A lot of producers we encounter are terribly scared of record companies. They seem to, you know, they're so worried about budgets and keeping happy because they have to work. You know, once they've finished an album with one artist, they like to think they'll get work from the company again. And the Electric album we actually recorded twice, which is fairly well documented. I mean, there's no point in going into the story. Suffice it to say, we'd spent a lot of money and done it once, and Rick really was only supposed to do a remix and record just 2 tracks. And between us, we all just decided that the only way to make the record sound how we wanted it was to re-record it. And I don't think a lot of producers would have had the guts to do that. They would have been too scared. But considering he owns his own, like, multi-million-dollar company, which is what Def Jam is now, it didn't really bother him too much.
A number of the Def Jam bands, such as the Beastie Boys and Run DMC, often use things that, guitar riffs or whatever, that sound like they come directly from Aerosmith or AC/DC or Led Zeppelin.
They do, they come off the records.
And they get sampled or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
They sample them. I like that, I think it's really good.
Yeah.
Bit of piracy.
It's kind of neat when they do the live shows, that what they do is they get a special record pressed up just purely for scratching and dubbing in to get all the effects put on a record. It's kind of interesting, that.
And they just sing over the top. So.
The thing is, of course, the cult's often been accused also of ripping off a lot of the rock bands, or some of the rock bands of the late 60s, early 70s.
We've ripped off everyone. We really have.
Seriously, though, what's your reaction to that?
I mean, to make rock records, I mean, our standpoint on rock music at the moment is that a lot of people make really AOR corporate rock records. They make them to get played on the radio. They don't make them, I think, with like a real intent to make good music. I think the corporate mentality creeps in and they just want to get stuff played on the radio, and I think that's kind of worrying. It's like it just propagates the thing where established artists get played all the time and new bands don't really get a chance. I mean, it's just a typical American thing of selling baked beans over the radio. You know, it's like they'll play what they think their listeners want to hear, and then they can sell them Oldsmobiles. And we just didn't want to do a record that was like that. I don't know, it was just a point. We felt that a lot of bands from a period of time that had been slagged off so badly in England, i.e. the late 60s, early 70s, we just felt that a lot of those bands did something right. I mean, rock music didn't exist particularly till like sort of 1967, wasn't it, that year, the wonderful year, man, when I was in short pants and eating ice cream. It seemed that before everything was rock then, and then suddenly it went into categories of acid rock, heavy metal, folk, blues, and they kind of went off in tangents, and it became a tad cliched. But I think like there was a couple of really great albums made in the early 70s in terms of blues rock, and we just wanted to not recreate it, but just learn from, you know, a way of doing things that seems to have been lost, an art that's lost, of like.
It's kind of more traditional and natural. You know, blues-based rock music is the ultimately natural form of rock, I think white rock music, you know, white music anyway. If you look at most artists these days, they've been influenced by one way or another by blues-based rock from the 70s. You know, people like Prince, for example. If it wasn't for people like Hendrix, etc., Prince wouldn't even exist, you know. So it's very traditional things, what we've been brought up with, it's what's influenced us. And I don't think we sound, we have our own sound, our own character, our own identity. You know, I don't sound like Robert Plant. I don't sound like anybody else. You know, I've got a very distinctive voice, but he's got a very distinctive guitar sound as well. You know, those are things we've developed over, like, since we've been playing and singing and stuff.
Mm.
So we go,
Well-
boo-ha, we blow your nose at those.
In
Well,
the general
obviously-
direction.
Yeah, well, obviously everybody is influenced by what's gone before.
Of course, I
and
think
the
it's cool,
records
you
they
know.
listen to.
It's like when the Beatles first came out, people were going, they just sound like Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers. We're not really interested. You know, we want the American thing. When the Beatles were like pushing around, trying to get record deals and stuff, people going, we don't want this, we want American stuff. We want the original
But
stuff.
I think perhaps why the criticism of the cult has been so consistent, yeah, apart from that general nastiness of the British music press anyway, but there are certain guitarists on certain cult songs that
Blues
sound...
music's very traditional.
But yeah, I mean,
You know,
like
there's
the
no
opening
point-
of Wildflower
there's no
is
point-
like an AC/DC.
Yeah, but there's no
opening.
point. I mean, some things occur naturally, you know. There's natural chords there, which sequences which sound good, which people will use. You probably hear those chord sequences on like about, I don't know, quite a lot of rock records anyway. They're the best sounding chords. You get the best power out of them, you know. Put the best melodies to them.
I think a lot of the problem with modern music and attitudes to it is that everybody's so concerned and interested in being modern and original, and what they tend to forget ultimately is like the quality of the songs. That was the whole problem with the positive punk scene in England, that people were so into being original and dropping names of bizarre German art movements that really they forgot about writing songs, and ultimately all those people are on unemployment now. And I think that, you know, I defend our... We're actually a bit too soft on people that say we sound like stuff, because there's thousands of bands that rip people off, like Simply
Blatantly.
Red, blatantly. What's so original about Sade? It's just people don't know the forms of music that they're influenced by, because we're never as popular as Led Zeppelin, who are probably the biggest band in the world. So when you get a band that in any way do rock stuff, easy, everybody knows about Led Zeppelin. Everybody grew up listening to Led Zeppelin. Particularly people in the media, and I think they're a little bit embarrassed about it. You know,
that's the thing that's happening in Britain. I think we were the first young band in England to come out and say, this is what we're into, these are our influences. We don't like Bauhaus, we don't like weird music. You know, we like really natural, powerful, energetic music. This is what we're into.
I'm
And
curious.
everyone just kind of shot us down in flames. 6 months later, as soon as we started working with Rick Rubin, Def Jam thing, everyone were like, okay, we can dig this.
They call
now,
it cool
because
now.
Def Jam are cool, so it must be cool. Then you've got like all these rock bands coming out of England now, and everyone's growing their hair. You know,
Joe, and the thing about Rick Rubin, he didn't care. Rick Rubin doesn't care. He just cares about good, and people who've got guts and people who've got a bit of talent. He doesn't really care about whether or not it's the most strikingly original noise ever to come out. It's not really relevant. I think what matters is how good the songs are, how good you are at doing it. And I think one of the things about the Cult is we're good at it. We're good at being a rock band. There's a lot of terrible rock bands out there. We've actually got a bit of quality and a bit of a natural talent. you know.
I found at one point when I first started that I really wanted to sound like people like Joplin. I really wanted to sound like Janis Joplin, just to push it so hard to try and sound like her. But I was really unhappy with my own voice, you know.
Just curious, Joplin and Led Zeppelin in their heyday, we're talking about, you know, 60s, come 70s, late
Yeah,
60s,
we're also
early
talking
70s.
about the cream of music.
How old
know,
were you?
we're talking about,
How
like-
old were you? What were you doing at...
We were little.
When, in their
we were
heyday?
toddlers.
So when did you discover
It was after
that
punk
music?
rock, because what happened was punk rock just blew everything apart. The fragments were just, they could never be put back together again, the music scene. It's never ever going to be the same again. But when it died, I was going out to clubs in Liverpool and I was starting to listen to things like, I don't know, for some reason people were playing The Doors. I think people were just like really bored with what was happening around about time. Nobody wanted to listen to Joy Division. Nobody wanted to listen to Killing Joke. It was just so dire and gloomy, you know. Everyone was trying to like rediscover the past. I think everyone actually asked the same question, what happened before 1976? You know, the things that people rebel against were things like Yes, you know, bands like Yes and
The
etc.
art
etc.
rock bands.
Yeah, progressive rock bands, you know, sort of like sixth form visions of, I don't know, people living on tops of mountains with dragons.
Concepts are
coming
cool,
along,
isn't
you know. And that was it, you know. I'd start hanging out in this place and listening to this kind of music. It was like blues-based rock music. It was really exciting, because it was new to me, it was fresh. when I heard Hendrix doing Purple Haze, I thought, this is incredible. You
So
know?
tell me, what records are you listening to these days?
All that stuff. No, I guess a few things come along now and again, you know. I've always bought every new Prince album, and he's never let me down in any of his records, you know. And new Aerosmith album, I think is really good. Guns N' Roses, I like them a lot.
Billy, what about you?
I think of a new record that come out that actually.
The Whitesnake album was, we played that to death, and then we just realised that there was only one good song in it, you know.
Yeah, a lot of albums, like I like the Whitesnake album for a while, and I like the new Motley Crue for a while, and then they don't seem to have the longevity of certain records that I own, so I tend to go back to stuff like, I don't know, The Free Story. I usually listen to.
What happened to Motorhead coming back at the moment? We think Motorhead are coming back.
Great.
Listen to a lot of Motorhead.
Look forward to that. Right, well, Billy and Ian, thanks very much.
Thank you.